So, hi, Steve. How are you today?
Hi, Phil. I'm doing really well, thanks. I hope you're doing the same down there in the Australian part of the world.
Yeah, no, things are good. So, today we've finally got to the day where we're going to record our topic about building an S4HANA Transition Team. I suppose initially I thought, interesting topic, a bit outside of the box, a little bit with VC, but obviously it's important. And so I just want to get just a quick snapshot of what's going through your brain on this one.
Sure, no problem. It was interesting because I've always been of the opinion that, before you can move on to another thing, you have to find somebody to do what you're doing now.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was at my last company, the one I was at for 41 years, it took me 7 years to find the right person and to get them to the point where I could walk out the door knowing that they could do a better job than I would do. And I believe that not everybody has the luxury of the amount of resources that I had when I was fully employed. So I thought I'd talk about that and hopefully get your viewpoint and see if I'm full of smoke, as we used to say in the US.
Yeah, okay. Well, let's see. So let's get started on it.
So let me share my screen with you.
Okay.
Can you see that, Phil?
I certainly can. Yep.
Okay. So you are.
To describe myself, I sort of sat down and thought, I'm a bit of a tech geek. So over the years, even before SAP, I played around with computers, dabbled in all sorts of stuff. SAP, one of them, VC, another, but also web and data science stuff, all sorts of stuff. So that's one piece of me. The other piece is all through my life, I've done running, a video blog, which I call Think on the Run. So I've done running over most of my life. So that's another big piece. And obviously, in recent years, I've also got the VC Essentials online training. So that's pretty much it.
Okay. And in case you're wondering who I am, I'm Steve Schneider. I'm fairly well known in the CWG for being a beer drinker, especially strong dark beers.
I think that's how we met.
In fact, it was, yes. It's interesting what you can find in bars and so forth and so on. I also have a reputation as being the AVC Customer Council's grumpy old man. And that was given to me based on some of the expressions that I had during conversations about future technology that I wasn't really quite in line with. And over the years, I've also been what they call a troublemaker at the CWG conferences. I mean, I'd bring beer into the conference, I'd give beer away, and some of the last couple of conferences, I actually chased board members around with sock puppets.
Yes.
Just, what the heck? You might as well have fun when you're presenting, and it made people laugh.
You've always been a happy troublemaker, I think.
So, the first thing I want to talk about, because Phil, you've been on the consultant side of it, and I've been on the business side of it. And my opinion is that consultants don't know everything, either about S4HANA or your business.
I'd like to argue against that, Steve, but I probably can't. I think you're spot on. Consultants definitely do not know everything. Some might pretend to, but you've always got to test them, particularly when they come into your business, not knowing your business. It's a bit of a path you have to take them on, I think.
Yeah, so if your business thinks that you're going to get by implementing S4 with just a team of external consultants, you're wrong. You have to have an internal team of people. And one of the reasons you want an internal team of people is because S4HANA is not done yet. It's still being developed. And you can actually influence SAP. They've been very open to customer influence in the development of certain pieces of S4HANA. The AVC and the IPD. And the IPD, you may not have heard of, it's Intelligent Product Design, two huge areas where they've involved the customer. The reality is time's running out. I would give it no more than 3 years at the max before those influence opportunities go away. And there's two basic implementation strategies, right? I mean, there's brownfield or greenfield. Brownfield meaning you're going to move all your customizations in. Greenfield meaning you're not. And there's a couple other consulting companies out there that are trying to sell things like Bluefield, but I'm sorry, as far as I'm concerned, that's just another version of brownfield. But it doesn't matter. You got to learn about the software and what it can do. And the reality is, the farther you go down the greenfield road, the more you need to know about the capabilities of this new thing called S4HANA. Of course, the more knowledge you need to gain, the longer it takes. And the reality is you should have started 2 or 3 years ago. But I know a lot of companies haven't started, and some companies have actually shut down their S4 investigations. And personally, I just think that's wrong.
I think there'll be a lot of companies that won't even be thinking about S4, and particularly previous presentations we've done around maintenance periods and SAP timelines in general. It doesn't necessarily push them in that direction either.
I mean, there's still companies out there that are running 4.6. So, just because SAP cuts off maintenance doesn't mean that you have to go to S4.
No, that's true.
And, this team that we're talking about here, it's not an implementation team at this point. I mean, it can be, but it doesn't have to be. At this point, it's more about beginning to understand the impacts to your business. And before we talk about the team, I'd like to talk a little bit about the demographics that you might find amongst your people within your company. If you think about the generations of people that are in the workforce, you've got baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, and Gen Z, basically. The baby boomer generation was born in 1946. That's when they started being born. And they ended being born in 1964. So that means that the oldest baby boomers today are 74 years old, and the youngest are 56. So that's how this works, right? So Gen X, they were born starting in 65 to 79. They're 55 and 41. Millennials, same thing, 80. But then you start overlaying some technology implications to it. Right? So, really at the end of the Gen X era is when video gaming became popular. And people say, well, what does video games have to do with much of anything? And the reality is, I think it has a lot to do with the way the later or the current generations think, more so than the older generations. Then when you look in 1994, at the end of the millennial generation, that's when 3D video gaming really became normal. In the 80s, it was, the Pac-Man thing, right? It was one dimension. You didn't see much. And then in the mid to late 90s, it started getting really video intense. And people that were playing games expected better and better and better graphics. Last but not least, you had these very, very interesting things like in-app purchases and social media. And they're normal for what you see today. Almost any app that you go out there today is going to have some kind of in-app purchasing. The interesting thing is, so do most of the games. So that's what this group of people is used to.
I think you're right. Like even us older people, we're living in that world a lot more now too. Like social media is part of the fabric. The other observation, I suppose, with COVID is esports has come to the fore a bit, particularly like things like car racing. It's almost like watching the live event. It's getting so real.
Well, as you know, I'm a motorcycle racing fan, and MotoGP has actually had 2 virtual races now, and there's actually been comparisons online of a screenshot of the live 4K high definition broadcast versus the video game. And it's almost impossible to tell them apart.
Scary.
Well, and the other term for this is digital immigrants and digital natives. And the bottom line is that it means the boomers and the Gen Xers, they didn't grow up with technology the way that millennials and Gen Z did. They migrated to technology. To be honest with you, I know a bunch of boomers and a bunch of Xers that still don't even get on social media.
Have they still got their VHS video players too?
And I'm not going to answer that because I've got an old technology sitting downstairs around my stereo that I don't want to talk about at this point in time.
Okay. But that highlights the point, I think.
But now, if you look at these generations and you start looking at the softwares that they have utilized over their careers, right? And the roles that they are playing in those careers, the older boomers are pretty much retired. And even some of the younger boomers are retired. That would be like me, Those older boomers are senior leaders. And when I say senior leaders, I mean, they might be part of your CIO staff. They might be a director. They're a high-level executive, or sometimes just a senior manager that has multiple people underneath them, right?
Yeah.
So are some of those older Gen Xers. Whereas, the millennials typically are still climbing the ladder, and the Gen Z folks are still pretty much coming into the ladder. And there's a bunch of legacy softwares that are still being run. If you saw what happened here in the US, there's a COBOL shortage, programmer shortage, right?
Yep, heard that.
That tells you how much legacy is still out there. So these pieces of software have been seen by these generations over the years. So what in the world would that mean when you're trying to build an S4 team? Generally, you need to be thinking that the boomers and the Gen Xers are going to go away. They aren't going to be around for that much longer. And the reality is that group of folks has a bunch of experience that a lot of the millennials and a lot of the Gen Zers don't have. And you really want to try to take advantage of it. And I don't mean just software experience. I mean soft skills like mentoring, team leadership, things of those natures. But the other problem with them in many cases is they've been around the customization world for a long, long time. They've got a whole bunch of what we call here in the States baggage, meaning they can't think differently. And they know the business and why the business wanted to go down those roads. And in the US, we have a saying called, those are the skeletons in the closet, right? They know where all the bones are buried. And something to be careful of is those older millennials, some of them that have been there for a long time at your company, 8 years, 9 years, might have just as much baggage as any boomer because that's all they've ever known. I'm of the opinion that, when you're looking around your company and you're trying to form this team, you need to be careful of the customizers. And they're easy to pick out. They're the ones that say yes to any request and they love to write code. That's what they want to do. They want to write custom code, right? And they want to make something new work exactly the same way that the old thing did in legacy because that's what they know.
Yeah. And I think from just purely looking at consulting, you jump into projects and it's really hard to get that mindset changed because they want the old system to look like the new system, and to move them off that is impossible sometimes. And then you get consultants who are happy to just, like you say, go, yes, we'll do that. And you pay the price ultimately.
Well, that's interesting you make that comment because I do know of a consultant who very early on in their career said to a company, you shouldn't do that. And the company said, well, if you don't do it for us, we'll find somebody else that will. And this consultant had very young children at the time, was just starting out, needed the money and said, fine, I'll do it. And now looks back and says, I wish I hadn't done that. But what choice did they have? They had no choice, right?
No, and that's true. And culture in a company plays a big part in it. Some companies encourage challenging an idea, others you'd be scared to.
And that comes into these next 2 points, very much a generalization because this is not true all over the place. No. But typically the younger the person, the faster they're willing to accept new and different things, be it technology or business process or whatever it is. I'll be the first one to tell you, I know some boomers that are every bit as fast to pick up on technology as the latest Gen Z person.
Yep.
But that's where politics come in. And to your point about company culture, politics just cannot be avoided.
I think teams need to recognize that, and they have to play to the politics or challenge it or understand how the organization works, I think.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that a little bit because basically we're going to talk about 2 different kinds of teams, right? A brownfield team. And, the brownfield, the first thing that you have to make your CEOs and CIOs and all of those really high level executives understand is that if you're going to go in brownfield, you're getting what you got. You're not getting anything new. You're not going to digitally transform, using those wonderful buzzwords. It's going to look the same way it always did. It's going to work the same way it always did. And that's for those companies that typically are more concerned with time and cost of implementation, meaning I want it in as fast as I can for as cheap as price as I can get it, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we'll transform later. No, you won't. You never do. In my opinion, if you're going to go down a brownfield, you want the boomers and the older Gen Xers to be the primary leaders of the team, because guess what? That's what they've done all their careers. They know how to do it fast. They're not going to question the decision. They're just going to go do it. This is an IT-driven project. This is not a business-driven project. This is basically just an upgrade from a business perspective. They're not going to see a whole lot of change, so you really don't have to manage them too much.
There'll be maybe some of the younger managers from the business will probably want to try and influence. They might see it as an opportunity to, well, not totally digitally transform, but to get an incremental improvement in some areas, I suppose. But yep.
Well, and to your point, it's the business partner concept, right? You're going to go from vendor masters and customer masters and supplier masters to a business partner.
Yeah.
So that is a change that finance group is going to undergo.
Yeah. So what you were sort of saying, in an extreme brownfield approach, is primarily an IT upgrade, if you want to put it that bluntly. Some nuances around that.
And typically the leaders in this team are going to be your higher level managers. They're not at the CIO level yet, but they're very comfortable with them. They've been around them for 20 years. They know those people very well.
Yeah.
And the reason that you want those folks as the leader is because when that young manager comes up and says, I want to digitally transform, they have to go back to that C-suite and say, hey, look, this guy wants to transform. You told me not to transform. Either squash him or change what I'm going to do. But the other key point about this is because those boomers and Gen Xers are going to be leaving in a few years, you want every other demographic. So you want the millennials, you want the younger Gen Xs, you want the Gen Zers. You want them included in this team because guess what? They're going to be doing it again in a few years.
Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah.
Hopefully, when they do it again in a few years, they'll do it as a greenfield. So let's talk about that team for a minute.
Okay.
If you're going greenfield, that basically means you're going to adopt the software as the software exists. You're not going to customize it. Are there companies out there that haven't customized? Yeah. Do they run VC? No. For almost any VC customer, they're going to do a true transformation in multiple different places around their company. And I want to have another conversation in configurable opinions about the intelligent product design and the AVC, because that has the potential to do a huge digital transformation for R&D functions within a given company.
Yeah, no, I'd be interested to hear that.
But the C-suite needs to really drive the fact that our company is going to change, and they can't turn around and say, well, except for this area where I want to customize. Won't work. In my opinion, the primary folks that should be involved as leaders in this team are millennials. I'm of the opinion that if you find the right millennials that don't have a ton of that baggage, or they're willing to be what I'll call a rebel and look seriously at new things, they're really going to transform your business. And I believe that the leaders of this team should come from the business, not IT. And the primary guy driving this team, in my opinion, should come from the e-commerce side. Maybe female, maybe male, don't know. Needs to be a millennial coming out of the e-commerce side. Why? Because in my opinion, you're going to see huge changes as to how product is sold in the next few years. And, I've heard the argument of, is selling it more important than making it? In my opinion, you can make everything in the world, but if you can't sell it, it does you no good.
So what you're really saying is it's really become customer facing as a priority.
Yeah, because the reality is you can digitally transform the back end all you want without ever having an impact to the customer. But the second you impact that customer, you better do it right, and you better do it in a positive way that derives value for that customer. So in my opinion, if you're looking at the folks that are doing this, these are not folks that have regular access to the C-suite. They're not well known by the C-suite. Some of them may be, but generally they're not the folks that are interacting on a regular basis with the C-suite. You want them to begin interacting with the C-suite, because guess what? That C-suite's going to change pretty soon too, because most of those leaders are boomers and very few are Gen Xers in big companies.
Yeah, and some of these ones on this Greenfield team may actually be some of the ones that move into the C-suite ultimately as well.
Eventually, these folks, in a lot shorter time frame than anyone's to think about, they're going to be your decision makers. I'm of the opinion that you still need to leverage those boomers and Gen Xers. Again, they've got a ton of experience. You can't let it go to waste. And the folks that you're using as the primary leadership on this team can really leverage those folks, assuming that those folks are willing to leave their baggage behind. And last but not least, you want your Gen Zers in there as your implementers, because guess what? They're going to be doing this again at some point in their career, and you want to give them the experience to do it now.
Okay. Yeah, no, that all makes sense. I think there's challenges in that, but it makes sense.
There's a lot of challenges in this. And, you pointed out one earlier about finding those resources. This is not a short-term exercise. If you're going to go greenfield, building this team is a minimum 2 to 3 year exercise, from building it to learning it to being ready to implement.
No, I think so. And I think if you view it like a company making a decision on building a new factory with high-tech equipment, they spend a lot of time and money planning, researching, sorting it out. And you've got to do the same with your whole business system as well. You've got to treat it as a production resource. And it's as important as any swish bang new machine you might purchase.
Well, I've heard a lot of companies say that people are their most important resources.
Yes.
Now's the time to prove that.
Yeah, I agree.
So eventually in this virtual conference, there's going to be a topic out on the forums where you'll be able to ask Phil and I questions in some manner. In the meantime, this same presentation will be posted out on our Configurable Opinions YouTube channel, the link of which is on the very first slide. Feel free to look at it. Feel free to show it to your C-suite, and we can be contacted with questions.
Yep, looking forward to getting some questions.
Eventually, there'll be a link where you can fill out the conference survey. Please remember to do that. And of course, the CWG, it's the only place where you can get this type of information. You're probably already a member, but if you're out on Configurable Opinions and you're not, go to this link and join up. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Phil, it's always great to talk to you, man. Looking forward to your other presentation on e-learning a lot.
Thanks, Steve, for putting this together. I think it's a topic that is useful. We haven't really talked about VC much at all, but I think it underpins what we need to do in the future. So thanks for that.
Okay, Phil. We'll talk about VC a little bit more on Configurable Opinions.
Okay. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Phil. Have a great day.
You too.